big difference, the first and fundamental big difference, is Adam. Adam. You know, Adam and Eve, Adam. The difference is, well, we know the story of Adam. We all know the Christian story of Adam, okay? Eve brought the apple, Adam ate it, they both have disobeyed God, thrown out of the garden, lived a life of sin ever since, until Jesus came along, roughly speaking. Okay? In the Holy Quran, one of the things, as I said about Islam, it's all repetitive. And if you looked up the index, you'd find there were 9 versions of the Adam story, or it was repeated 9 times. On 3 of those times, not everyone, but on 3 of the times, Adam is thrown out of the garden and repents. And in Islam, if you repent sincerely, God forgives you. So no original sin, no need for a redeemer, no need for crucifixion, no need for resurrection, because we've got it already. All we have to do is to say, sorry God, that's it. And it's a very fundamental difference. And too often in dialogue of this nature, Christians walk into the dialogue automatically assuming that we're all on original sin, because that's what we teach. But Muslims don't have original sin. They have sin. Oh yeah, sin's there, alive and kicking, but not original sin. So that's the first one. Okay? Let me give you a second one. I'll give you 3 if I may, but I can give you more. Is Jesus. Isa. Jesus occurs throughout the Holy Quran. And again, it's in their style of repetition. Born miraculously of Mary, taught, etc. Doesn't have the detail of the parables that occur in the New Testament, and a little less on the miraculous side too. But the personality of Jesus is very important. His rating, because he was miraculously born, he is seen to be, therefore, at the very top level. But he's not God. Not God. You can't. There's one, in Islam, there is one God. And they do not have incarnation, because they don't have original sin. So, the big issue, which is, if you ever talk to a Muslim, and you get him, her onto it, is, did Jesus die on the cross? And the majority view, the vast majority view, is he didn't. So you then get into the commentators, because in the Quran it doesn't say how or what. Things like, they tried to crucify him, but. Because crucifixion of a leading person, i.e. someone who's of the same level as the Holy Prophet in inspiration, and in Islam, all the prophets, by definition, are sinless. You couldn't have someone publicly executed, as Jesus was, and still maintain that they were purely innocent and sinless. You can't have innocent public execution. So what happened? Well, that is a maze of wonder for different commentators. Some say Jesus was put on the cross, but then just pulled down, and someone was put up in his place. Done. That's one of the stories. The other story is that he miraculously came down. And the third story is, it looked as though he was crucified, but he wasn't. In other words, there is no clear teaching in the Holy Quran about what actually happened to Jesus, except to say, Jesus is alive. But you see, if you don't have original sin, you don't need resurrection. Because you're going to go to heaven anyway. You repent your sins, they are forgiven. What's stopping you? So that's a wonderfully simple way of looking at things. But that's their truth. So on the question of Jesus, the big difference is he is a unique human being in the same way as the prophet was a unique human being, especially gifted by God. But he was not part of what we would call a redemption exercise. He was not God incarnate. He was not Jesus, God made man. Therefore, he didn't need to have a death which was going to be the means for unlocking the prison of sinfulness that we were all in. And that's why there is similarity and difference. If you look at the question of Mary, it's even more interesting. Mary's name occurs in the Quran, which is about the length of the New Testament, just to make sure you see this. It's not the size of our Bible. Mary occurs more times, her name occurs more times in the Quran than it does in the New Testament. But that's largely, they say that, and if ever a Muslim comes up to you and says, well, we've got more about Mary than you have, you say, yes, but you most of the time are calling it Jesus, son of Mary. In other words, they're constantly identifying Jesus as the son of Mary, but a miraculously conceived son. So you can see that within that area, if you wanted to do a comparison between our scripture and the Holy Quran, the one person to do it with is Joseph. Not Joseph, the foster father of Jesus, but Joseph, the patriarch of Genesis, the guy who gets sold by his brothers and then goes off to Egypt, then becomes big waller in Egypt. That story, you can literally, is in one surah. Surah is named chapter, and you can parallel it. It's the only one. And it is remarkably similar, the two stories. There are differences. But if you do that, if you wanted to do a study, that's one of the interesting ones, because what comes out in that story, more strongly in the Quran than in the Genesis, is the faith of Isaac. Is it Isaac? Keep on getting mixed up. The father of Joseph. Jacob, because he's constantly worrying about this elder son who's disappeared and the brothers have murdered it, all that sort of stuff. But in the Quran, it's more explicit how he puts his trust in God. And of course, that is the heart of their spirituality. The immediate sense of the presence of God through the words of the prophet. I think I've said enough, have you? Oh, if you want to get online, I'll send the information here, but it's not started yet. I'm doing 2 courses online. One is for what I call adult education, and the other is for university. The adult education is for people who just like to do a little bit of research without having a big academic process. Coffee?
Thank you very much for that.
I wanted to, just one, please. Sorry for a late one. Now, mine concerns the Holy Trinity.
Oh yeah.
It's a very difficult thing to understand.
It is.
Protestants understand it differently. Catholics, the teaching is a little bit different. Okay, maybe you'll explain that a bit. But then, how do they look at it also? What is their view of the Holy Trinity?
Can I say, I'll start off with this little anecdote. I was in one of my early visits to Qom in Iran, which is their Vatican, the Shia Vatican. And we were in this common room of professors. And this American Muslim got up and said, Timothy, why is it you believe in 3 gods? I said, what? I said, you believe in 3 gods. Trinity means 3. And of course, we now landed ourselves with the word Trinity, which actually, for most people around the world, does mean 3. And it's quite subtle to have to explain, actually, it's one God with three lots of eyes, or however you want to put it. but the point about in Islam, they go to the other extreme. We Christians hold, we believe in the one God. I believe in God, okay? I believe in one God. Muslims say exactly the same. Our Trinity comes out of the relationship that this God has with us, the human world. The relationship of God becoming man and us becoming God through the Holy Spirit. Oh, that's a bit exaggerated, but the point is that we see it as the different functions of the one God. And they interpret it, or many of them interpret it, as Christians believing in three gods. And part of our faith comes out of this sense in which a creating God and a redeeming God and a spiritual God are three aspects of the one God. And it is very important that we see it that way when you're talking to Muslims. So when they challenge us, I always say nonsense. I say, you don't understand the word Trinity. Well, I do, he says, or she says. I do. It means three. And I say, no, it doesn't. Not in this case. And you have to be very patient. But we do actually, if you're in dialogue with Islam, for goodness sake, don't start with Trinity. Because you'll be there for another hour trying to work out how you're going to explain three and one. And they're going to say one is one. And at the end of the day, it's just not worthwhile going down that path in any depth. Why? Because their understanding of the role of the one God is in the sense in which the revelation to the Holy Prophet was, as you probably know, he used to go up, Muhammad used to go up to this cave above Mecca and have what we would call a day of recollection, or a day off, or a day on his own. And occasionally he would bring one of his friends up. On this particular day, it is thought that one of his friends was there, and suddenly he gets overtaken by this, how can you say, mystical experience. And out of this mystical experience comes the word proclaim. And out of that, in Arabic, came the first revelation of the Quran. And because, as I said earlier, they were all memorizers, that's how the Quran came to develop. Now, what is interesting about that is that they will tell you that Arabic, it's a Muslim, Arabic is God's language. Because the angel spoke. The angel was, so to speak, the loudspeaker, okay, from the heavenly being, God, to Muhammad through the angel. It couldn't go from God to straight to, because they don't believe in any form of incarnation or anything like that. God is totally other. That's why Jesus is not God in the Quran. There's only one God. And the God is the responsible creator of all. And so God couldn't go and tap Muhammad on the shoulder and say, get on with this. He had to do it through a communication. And he did a series of these over years, which very shortly after the death of Muhammad became formalized as the Holy Quran as we have today. The important point is that there was a group of about 8 or 9 fellow people who were supporters, who learnt all this by heart. But the key thing from a Christian Catholic point of view, it's where we get easily wrong. And I got it wrong once. I was at a meeting, and I put my Quran on the floor. Wow, this melted. And so I picked it up. The truth for them is, we hold that the bread and wine become the body and blood of Christ. And we do great reverence to the Eucharist. Quite right. They believe that the Quran in Arabic is literally God speaking. when you hear Arabic, you're hearing God speaking. Because God created Arabic to speak. A few Christians got it all wrong. But from a Muslim point of view, so if you treat the Quran like burn a Quran day, and it's got Arabic in there, it is a massive offence for them. And you have to look at it within their from their perspective. As we would, if someone, if an atheist comes into a mass and suddenly gets hold of a consecrated host, we would be deeply upset, quite rightly so, because of and it's for them. But it has, if it's an English version of the Quran, it doesn't matter, or a French or whatever, it has to be the Arabic. So when you're handling the Arabic Quran, make sure that don't try to be abusive to it, because we have to learn respect. But don't pretend that the Quran is like the Bible. It's like spiritual direction, repetitive. Sorry, I've gone on too. Oh yes, sorry.
Also come excuse me. How do they believe that Jesus was conceived? That's a simple question. Very hard question. How do they believe that Jesus came about in the womb of the Virgin Maria?
Quite similar to us. It was an angel.
Yes, they believe
An angel. It's in the Quran, yes. And it is a miracle, as far as they're concerned. It's a miracle. This is why Jesus is special for them.
special form.
Yeah, he is a unique. Jesus and the prophets are on the same. We've been doing this game now for a whole week. They're kind of a boring part of the retreat discourse. They came up and rearranged it. I think if you read it, you would find that the same sort of culture, i.e. an angelic intervention. In other words, it's not very different from ours. No, I mean, it's different in the sense that the person who is conceived is maybe called Jesus by both, but one is definitely the Son of God, and the other is a holy prophet, i.e. one's human and the other's divine. This is where if I can put it this way around, as I talk to a lot of Christians, one of our problems as Christians in this context is that we see everything through Christian eyes and Christian ears. Therefore, quite rightly, when we absorb something which is different, the first thing that happens is we judge how different it is. And if it's radically different, we tend to say, waste paper basket, boom. And the point about what I'm trying to say is that you simply cannot do that with another religious faith, who in the Vatican Council terms believe in the one God, who is a creator, a guide, a forgiver of sin, and offers life after death. So we have to have respect. But in having respect, no one is served if we don't have an accurate idea where the boundaries are. And a lot of people don't have an accurate idea. Partly because there is not the same consistency in the Quran as you might find in Catholic teaching. And partly because the nature of the Quran as a book is it's not so easy to digest theologically, because it's a book of spiritual reading. It's God speaking to me, as the New Testament is God speaking to me. And that is why we have to be respectful of their position.
I have a question.
Oh yes, sister. I'll get away from the table so I don't pull the camera.
I would like to know if there is a difference between the Quran and the Bible by the grouping of the books, the Old Testament and the New Testament, and if they have the same numbers of books as the Bible has, or there is a difference.
No, there is a big difference. The Bible, our Bible is divided up into the Pentateuch, wisdom literature, the prophets, the historical books, etc. And then we have the New Testament. They don't have anything like that at all. Their first surah is the key surah for the whole of Islam, because it is the confession of faith. And it was the very first words that God revealed to the Prophet. And it's the standard bit that every Muslim knows. The second thing about the Quran is, this is why you have to, its chapters vary in length. So you have this tiny little thing to start with. And what is it, 114 surah, they call them surah. But number 2 is the longest, and it goes down like that. And the point about it is that there is no logic. I mean, the story is named, yes, but there's no, you don't follow things through like you do in the Bible. So you start. That's why I say go to the index as a Christian, because if you say I want to know what the Quran says about Adam, then you look up Adam and you'll get all the references, and you just follow each of the references. There's no part of the Quran which says this is the story of Adam, as it does in the book of Genesis. So, for a Christian to read the Quran as if it is a version of the New Testament, finds himself in a total muddle after 5 minutes. And I've met many people who I've said, it's a good book to read, the Quran, if you want to read a book. But be prepared for repetition. Be prepared. There's no logic like there is in our scriptures. But I'll leave that aside. Take all your, in other words, undress yourself from your Christian biblical tradition and enter this with the freedom to say, well, what's being said? And if those who know it well will say, yes, there's a lot of encouragement. There's a lot of sense of purpose, of moral standards. But it's much more confusing from a Christian perspective than we would normally have. So we can't bring our usual biblical model onto the Quran. But we can see how the Quran uses personalities within our scriptures. And that, I think, is one of the most interesting things. Okay? Sorry. Oh, yes, sister. Even when you go for coffee, you can still ask me questions.
In the Old Testament, the God of the Israelites would command them to kill human beings, and it was taken as a holy thing. I also met a Muslim who told me that sometimes it's a holy thing to kill somebody. I don't know what condition on how they look at killing a human being.
I think there are several things here, several points, because it's a very important question, very important. Some of the Muslim scholars of the Quran have spent a lot of time working out what the Quranic view is on war. And the one I am thinking of wrote a whole chapter on the Quranic understanding of war. And in it showed that the basic teaching of the Quran is anti-war. That's number one. Second basic teaching is, but you have a right to defend yourself. The environment of Arabia in the Prophet's time, we mustn't forget, is groups of people who lived on oases, because you can't live without water in a desert. The normal occupation in a desert for a man is not cultivating the oasis. It's going out and fighting the neighbours on their horses or camels or whatever. That is all they enjoy doing. So fighting was inbuilt in the rivalry between these different oases. And this was very much part of the early history of Islam, until it sort of moved into being a much more, the whole of Arabia adopted it as a religion. But this man, who I'm thinking of, he did a very close study of what the Prophet had said about war, about fighting, etc. Because even the early Muslims had to defend themselves against the anti-Muslims. And he was very clear. He used to say things like, when you look at your enemy in the eyes, we're not dealing with atom bombs now or things, rockets thrown from one end of the world to the other. We're looking at hand-to-hand fighting. When you look at the enemy in your eyes, in his eyes like that, you're looking at God. In other words, respect your enemy. You might have to kill him because he might kill you first. But nevertheless, you've got to respect him. And part of his thing, when you take prisoners, you have to look after them and you have to respect them. There's a very link to this, so that deep in it, that doesn't mean to say that everyone obeys it. Everyone in this room is an expert on the Bible. But there are many Christians who behave ways which are contrary to the Bible. Doesn't make the Bible invalid. So Muslims can behave contrary to the teaching of Islam, and still doesn't mean to say that's what Islam is about. For example, the fundamentalist Muslims now, I would, particularly their theological view, and Maximilian would know more about this than I do, but my ISIS and these groups, my view is they are not based on the Quran, on the real spirituality of the Quran. They are based on the sense that we are a promoting religion, an evangelizing religion, yes, but not an evangelizing religion which takes makes no concern for the religions of others. And that is what this very fundamentalist group of Muslims are doing at the moment. And they're a nightmare to deal with, because they don't mind chopping a head off. So if you go in the wrong place at the wrong time, no one minds, because you're a heathen. But the vast majority of Muslims would not hold that. And certainly any Muslims living outside Saudi Arabia, and perhaps a little bit in some parts of the countries of the Middle East. But fundamentalist Islam, which is, we are the only one that's right, is not the true Muslim. The true Muslim is someone who will come into dialogue, with whom you can pray. The people we deal with in Iran on our dialogue, very intelligent, they wanted to learn more about Christianity. But warfare, some commentators would say that they have a better theology of warfare and the negativity about it than the Christians